He was just a quiet, single dad mopping floors in a corporate high-rise, invisible to everyone in tailored suits who rushed past him daily. No one knew his past. No one noticed the faded ink barely visible beneath his rolled sleeves. But on a cold October night, when 5 men cornered a powerful CEO in a dark alley behind the building, everything changed. She was trapped, surrounded, her empire worth billions but unable to buy her way out of this moment. And when his 7-year-old daughter looked up from her homework in the janitor's closet and whispered, "Daddy," someone screaming, he didn't hesitate. What happened in that alley would expose a past he'd buried, reveal a symbol that made hardened criminals flee, and awaken a connection between 2 people from completely different worlds. This isn't just a rescue story. It's a story about second chances, the weight of secrets, and how one man's darkest chapter became someone else's only hope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut through downtown Portland like a blade, sending fallen leaves skittering across the pavement in chaotic spirals. Inside the glass and steel tower of Apex Financial Solutions, the 40th floor gleamed under fluorescent lights that hummed with the constant energy of ambition and deadlines. Most of the offices had emptied hours ago, but a few workstations still glowed with the blue light of active computer screens. Dylan Porter pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway, the wheels squeaking softly in rhythm with his steps. At 34, he moved with an economy of motion that suggested someone who had learned long ago not to waste energy on unnecessary flourishes. His dark hair was pulled back into a small knot at the base of his neck, and his gray maintenance uniform hung loose on his broad frame. The sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with faded ink that most people never looked at long enough to decipher. He wasn't the kind of man people noticed. In a building filled with executives in $1,000 suits and analysts clutching tablets worth more than his monthly rent, Dylan was part of the architecture. Invisible, forgettable, exactly how he preferred it. He paused at the executive suite and knocked twice before entering. The corner office belonged to Madeline Brooks, and even at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, she was still there. Dylan had learned her patterns over the past 8 months. She was always the last to leave, always working under the glow of her desk lamp while the city sparkled below her like a carpet of stars. Madeline sat behind a curved glass desk, her fingers moving rapidly across a keyboard. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse, her auburn hair twisted into a neat twist that had probably looked perfect 12 hours ago, but now showed signs of a long day. At 41, she had built Apex Financial from a startup in her garage into a fintech empire valued at $3 billion. Forbes had called her the most innovative mind in algorithmic trading. The Wall Street Journal had profiled her revolutionary approach to democratizing investment tools for everyday people. But right now, she just looked tired. Dylan moved quietly, emptying the small trash bin near her desk and wiping down the glass conference table by the window. He had perfected the art of being present without intruding, of moving through spaces without demanding acknowledgement. "Long night, Miss Brooks?" he asked, his voice low and even. She glanced up, blinking as if surprised to find another human in the room. "Every night's long lately," she said, offering a tight smile. "Board meeting tomorrow. Trying to prepare answers for questions I know they'll ask but hope they won't." Dylan nodded, spraying cleaner on the glass and wiping it, in smooth circles. "Sounds stressful." "It's the price of the throne," she said with a dry laugh. Then she paused, tilting her head slightly. "You're always here late too. Don't you have somewhere else to be?" Dylan's hand stilled for just a moment. "I do," he said quietly. "But she's doing homework in the break room right now, so I'm exactly where I need to be." Madeline's expression softened. "Your daughter, Summer, 7 years old, finishes her assignments while I finish mine." There was something in his tone, a gentle firmness, that made Madeline set down her pen. That must be hard. Juggling everything alone, Dylan shrugged. We make it work. She's tougher than I am most days. Madeline studied him for a moment longer than necessary. There was something about this janitor, something steady and unhurried, that felt out of place in a world that moved at the speed of fiber optic cables. His eyes were calm but watchful, the kind of eyes that had seen things most people only read about. Well, she said finally, tell Summer I said good luck with her homework. Dylan smiled, a rare expression that reached his eyes. I will. He finished cleaning and moved back into the hallway, the cartwheels squeaking their familiar tune. He passed frosted glass doors labeled with titles like Senior Vice President and Director of Operations, spaces filled with expensive furniture and motivational posters about synergy and innovation. Dylan had seen 1,000 offices like these in a dozen cities. The names changed, the views shifted, but the rhythm stayed the same. People climbed, people fell, and people like him swept up the debris. At the end of the hall, tucked behind a service door marked Maintenance, was a small break room. It smelled like instant coffee and industrial soap. A folding table sat in the center, surrounded by metal chairs with peeling paint. Sitting at that table, legs swinging beneath her, was Summer. She had her father's dark hair, but wore it in 2ND. And Faye, 10, end of 10, braids that hung over her shoulders. Her pink backpack, covered in patches of planets and dinosaurs, sat open beside her. In front of her was a worksheet filled with math problems, and she was chewing on the eraser of her pencil with the intense focus of someone trying to crack a secret code. How's it going, Sonny? Dylan asked. Using the nickname that always made her smile, she looked up, her face brightening. I'm stuck on number 12. It's about fractions, and I hate fractions. Dylan pulled out a chair and sat beside her. He smelled like cleaning chemicals and faintly of the peppermint gum he always kept in his pocket. Let's take a look. He leaned over the worksheet, his large hands dwarfing the small paper. As he explained the problem, Summer watched him with absolute trust. To her, her father wasn't just a janitor. He was the smartest, strongest, safest person in the world. He had always been there. Every soccer game, every scraped knee, every nightmare that sent her running to his room in the dark. Their life wasn't easy. They lived in a one-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, where the walls were thin and the neighbors sometimes yelled. Dylan slept on the couch, so Summer could have the bedroom. They ate a lot of pasta and rice, and new clothes came from thrift stores. But they had each other. And in Summer's world, that made them rich. Got it? Dylan asked, tapping the paper gently. Summer nodded, already writing the answer with renewed confidence. Got it. Dylan ruffled her hair and stood, checking the industrial clock on the wall. 9:45. Another 15 minutes and they could head home. He had one more floor to finish, just a quick pass through the executive lobby and restrooms. And then they would walk the 6 blocks to the bus stop. He glanced toward the window. Outside, the city glittered in shades of gold and white, but he could see the edges of dark clouds rolling in from the west. Rain was coming. He made a mental note to grab Summer's raincoat from his locker. As Dylan returned to his cart and began the final sweep of the evening, he felt the familiar rhythm settle over him. This was his life now. Predictable. Safe, quiet, and that was exactly what he needed, what they both needed, because Dylan Porter had not always been a janitor. Once, he had been someone else entirely, someone whose hands had done things that required no mop, no broom, no cart, someone whose skills had been measured not in square footage cleaned, but in problems eliminated. But that life was gone, buried, locked away beneath rolled sleeves and averted eyes. The only evidence of it was the ink on his skin, symbols and marks that most people never noticed and fewer still understood. And if Dylan had his way, no one ever would. Madeline Brooks finally powered down her laptop at 10:15. Her eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, and her shoulders ached from hours hunched over the keyboard. She stood slowly, stretching her arms overhead, and rolling her neck until it cracked softly. The office felt too quiet now, almost oppressive in its silence. She gathered her things, a leather briefcase that cost more than most people's rent, her phone, and a half-empty bottle of sparkling water. As she walked toward the elevator, her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor. The sound echoed in the empty corridor, a lonely rhythm that reminded her just how alone she was. The elevator descended smoothly, the digital numbers ticking down from 40 to 1. Madeline checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her ex-husband's attorney. 2 emails flagged urgent from board members. 1 text from her assistant reminding her about the morning meeting. She sighed and tucked the phone into her coat pocket. The lobby was dim, lit only by the security lights and the faint glow from the street outside. The night guard, an older man named Porter, no relation to Dylan, sat behind the desk reading a paperback novel. He looked up and nodded. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Good night, Miss Brooks. Be safe out there. You too, Harold. See you tomorrow. She pushed through the revolving glass door and stepped into the November night. The cold hit her immediately, cutting through her wool coat and making her pull it tighter around her body. The street was quieter than usual. Just a few scattered cars passing by and the distant sound of a siren somewhere to the south. Madeline's car was parked in the underground garage, but she had decided this morning to walk the 3 blocks to her apartment. Fresh air, she had told herself. Exercise. A chance to clear her head. Now, standing in the cold with the wind biting at her face, she regretted that decision. She turned left down Alder Street, her breath misting in the air. The buildings loomed on either side, dark except for the occasional lit window. This part of downtown emptied out fast after business hours, leaving behind a strange hollowness that felt both peaceful and unsettling. Halfway down the block, Madeline heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. Footsteps were normal. This was a city. People walked, but something about the rhythm made her pulse quicken. They were too deliberate, too close. She walked faster. The footsteps matched her pace. Madeline's hand slipped into her coat pocket, fingers closing around her phone. She considered calling someone. But who? The police? And say what? Someone was walking behind her? She felt foolish even thinking it. Then she heard voices. Multiple voices. Hey, lady. Madeline's stomach dropped. She didn't stop, didn't turn, just kept walking, her heels clicking faster now. Hey, we're talking to you. She turned the corner sharply, hoping to find other people, lights, safety. Instead, she found an alley. Narrow, dark, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes. And before she could backtrack, they were already surrounding her. 5 men, ranging in age from early 20s to mid-30s. They wore dark hoodies and jackets, faces partially obscured by shadows. They moved with a coordination that told Madeline this wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. They had been waiting. The tallest one stepped forward. He had a scar running from his temple to his jaw, and his eyes were cold, calculating. "Nice coat," he said. "Bet that cost a few thousand." Madeline's throat tightened. "I don't want trouble. You can have my wallet. Just let me go." Another man laughed, younger, with a nervous energy that made him more dangerous. "Oh, we'll take the wallet, and the watch, and that fancy briefcase. But first, we want the phone. Password unlocked." Madeline's mind raced. Her phone had access to everything. Bank accounts, company files, security systems. If they got into it, they could ruin her in hours. "I can't do that," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The scarred man smiled. "It wasn't kind. You can. And you will." They closed in, forming a tighter circle. Madeline's back hit the cold brick wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about screaming, but the street behind them was empty. No one would hear. No one would come. One of the men reached for her briefcase. She jerked it away, and he grabbed her wrist instead, squeezing hard enough to make her gasp. "Don't make this difficult," he hissed. Inside the building, 40 floors above, Dylan Porter finished wiping down the executive restroom sinks. He checked his watch. 10:20. Time to collect Summer and head home. He pushed his cart back toward the break room, mentally running through tomorrow's checklist. The third-floor conference room needed a deep clean. The lobby windows had fingerprints, standard stuff. But as he passed the stairwell door, he heard something. Faint, muffled, a sound that didn't belong. Dylan stopped, listened. There it was again. A voice. Sharp, panicked. He moved to the window that overlooked the side street and the alley below. At first, he saw nothing. Just shadows and dumpsters. Then movement. A cluster of figures. And in the center, pressed against the wall, was Madeline Brooks. Dylan's body went still. His mind, however, snapped into a mode he hadn't accessed in years. He assessed the scene in seconds. 5 assailants. 1 victim. Enclosed space. No visible weapons yet, but the body language screamed aggression. He turned and walked quickly back to the break room. Summer looked up from her finished homework, smiling. "All done, Daddy. Can we go home now?" Dylan crouched in front of her, his expression calm but serious. "Sonny, I need you to stay here for a few minutes. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me. Understand?" Her smile faded. "What's wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about. I just need to help someone. I'll be right back." Summer's eyes were wide, but she nodded. She trusted him completely. Dylan kissed her forehead, then stood and walked to his locker. He rolled his sleeves down carefully, covering the ink on his forearms. Then he headed for the stairs. As he descended, his breathing slowed. His heartbeat steadied. The old training, the skills he had sworn never to use again, rose to the surface like muscle memory. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was something else entirely. And those men in the alley had no idea what was about to happen. Dylan hit the ground floor in under a minute, his footsteps silent on the stairs despite his speed. He pushed through the service exit door that led directly to the side alley, the same alley where Madeline Brooks was cornered. The cold air hit him immediately, but he barely noticed. His focus had narrowed to a single point. The scene was worse up close. Madeline's briefcase lay on the ground, its contents spilled across the dirty pavement. One of the men held her wrist twisted behind her back, while another rifled through her coat pockets. The scarred leader stood watching with crossed arms, a smug satisfaction on his face. "Please," Madeline was saying, her voice strained but still defiant. "You don't want to do this. I have security footage, cameras everywhere." The scarred man laughed. "Not back here, you don't. We checked. This whole alley is a blind spot. Funny how a billion-dollar company skimps on the cheap real estate, huh?" Dylan stepped into the alley. His presence was quiet but immediate, like a stone dropped into still water. "Let her go." 5 heads turned. For a moment, no one moved. Then the youngest one, the nervous one, laughed. "You serious, man? You the janitor, or something?" Dylan didn't answer. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, eyes moving from face to face, reading postures, identifying weaknesses. The leader was overconfident. The young one was impulsive. The one holding Madeline was distracted. The 2 in the back were followers, waiting for orders. The scarred leader pushed off the wall and walked toward Dylan. "This doesn't concern you, friend. Walk away. Forget you saw anything." "Can't do that," Dylan said simply. "Then you're an idiot." The man cracked his knuckles. "Last chance. Turn around." Dylan's gaze shifted to Madeline. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, she saw something in him that made her breath catch. It wasn't anger or bravado. It was certainty, the kind of absolute calm that only comes from someone who knows exactly what they're capable of. The scarred man threw the first punch. It was fast, practiced, meant to intimidate. But Dylan moved faster. He sidestepped, let the fist sail past his ear, and in the same motion, grabbed the man's wrist and twisted. The crack was audible. The man screamed and dropped to his knees. Everything happened at once after that. The young one rushed forward, pulling something from his pocket. A knife, short blade, serrated edge. Dylan saw it coming, ducked under the wild swing, and drove his elbow into the attacker's ribs. The man folded, gasping. The knife clattered to the ground. The one holding Madeline shoved her aside and charged. Dylan pivoted, using the man's momentum against him, redirecting him straight into a dumpster. The metallic clang echoed through the alley. The man slid down, dazed. The two in the back hesitated. They looked at each other, then at their leader writhing on the ground clutching his wrist, then at Dylan, who stood in the center of the alley barely breathing hard. That's when it happened. As Dylan adjusted his stance, his sleeve rode up, just for a moment, just enough, and in the faint light from the street lamp, the tattoo on his forearm became visible. It wasn't large, it wasn't colorful, it was simple black ink, but the design was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. A skull with a serpent coiled through the eye sockets. Beneath it, 3 letters. V. S. K. The 2 men in the back saw it. Their faces went white. One of them actually stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. "No way," he whispered. "No way." The other one grabbed his arm. "We need to go. Now." The scarred leader looked up from the ground, confused. "What are you talking about?" But his men were already running. They bolted from the alley like it was on fire, their footsteps echoing into the distance. The young one with the bruised ribs crawled to his feet and followed, limping badly. Even the man who had hit the dumpster managed to stagger upright and flee, leaving only the leader behind. He stared at Dylan's arm. The tattoo now partially visible again, as Dylan reached down to help Madeline to her feet. The man's face twisted from anger to recognition to pure fear. "You're one of them," he said hoarsely. "I thought that crew was disbanded. I thought you were gone." Dylan said nothing. He just looked at the man with those calm, unreadable eyes. The scarred leader scrambled backward, then got to his feet and ran, cradling his broken wrist. And just like that, the alley was empty except for Dylan and Madeline. Madeline stood against the wall, her chest heaving, her hair disheveled. She stared at Dylan like she was seeing him for the first time. "What just happened?" she asked breathlessly. "What did they see? What is that tattoo?" Dylan pulled his sleeve down carefully, covering the ink. "Nothing you need to worry about." "That's not an answer." He bent down and started gathering her belongings, placing them back into her briefcase with methodical care. Her phone, her wallet, a leather-bound planner. He handed it all back to her without meeting her eyes. "You should get home," he said quietly. "It's not safe out here." Madeline took the briefcase, but she didn't move. "Who are you?" she asked. "And don't tell me you're just a janitor. Janitors don't move like that. Janitors don't make 5 grown men run in terror from a tattoo." Dylan finally looked at her, in the dim light. His face was shadowed, but his eyes held a depth of experience that made Madeline's questions die in her throat. He wasn't going to tell her. Not tonight, maybe not ever. "I'm someone who's trying very hard to be just a janitor," he said at last. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd let me keep trying." He turned to leave, but Madeline reached out and touched his arm. Not grabbing, just a light touch that made him pause. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Dylan nodded once. "Good night, Miss Brooks." He walked back toward the service entrance, his shoulders tense, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Madeline watched him go, her mind spinning with questions. What was V.S.K.? Why did hardened criminals flee at the sight of it? And who was Dylan Porter before he became the invisible man who mopped her floors? She didn't have answers. But as she finally left the alley and hurried toward her apartment, one thing was crystal clear. Her life had just intersected with someone far more dangerous and far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. And somehow, she knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Dylan climbed the stairs back to the 40th floor, his pulse finally beginning to slow. The adrenaline that had flooded his system during the confrontation was ebbing now, leaving behind the familiar emptiness that always followed. He flexed his hands, checking for damage. Nothing. Clean, controlled. Just like the old days. But those days were supposed to be over. He reached the break room and knocked twice, their signal. "Sonny, it's me." The door unlocked immediately, and Summer's worried face appeared. "Are you okay? You were gone forever." Dylan managed to smile and stepped inside, locking the door behind him. "I'm fine. Just had to help someone who needed it." Summer studied him with the unsettling perception that 7-year-olds sometimes possess. Was it bad? Nothing I couldn't handle. He checked his watch. 10:38. "Come on, let's get you home. School tomorrow." As they gathered Summer's things, Dylan's mind was already working through the implications of what had just happened. He had broken cover. Not completely, but enough. The tattoo had been seen, and worse, it had been recognized. VSK Viper Strike Collective. The name alone carried weight in certain circles. It was a ghost organization, supposedly dissolved 8 years ago after a federal crackdown on underground enforcement groups. But the people who remembered, the people who had crossed paths with VSK operatives, they never forgot. The tattoo was a mark, a warning, a promise that violence would be met with precision. Dylan had earned that ink when he was 23, young and angry, and looking for purpose in all the wrong places. The collective recruited from the margins, people with skills but no direction. They weren't criminals, not exactly. They operated in the gray spaces where law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't go. Protection for people the system failed. Justice for those who couldn't afford it. Retribution when mercy ran out. It had felt noble at first. Necessary. But it hadn't taken long for Dylan to see the darkness underneath. The collective's methods were brutal, efficient, and increasingly indiscriminate. When he tried to leave, they made it clear that walking away came with consequences. Then he met Summer's mother, Elena. She was a social worker, idealistic and fierce, and she saw something in Dylan worth saving. She gave him a reason to try. When Summer was born, Dylan made her a promise. He would leave that life behind, completely, no matter what it cost. Elena's death 3 years later in a car accident had nearly broken him. But Summer needed him. So he had run. Changed cities. Changed names. Became invisible. A janitor. A single father. Nobody. Until tonight. Summer tugged on his sleeve as they rode the elevator down. "Daddy, you're quiet." "Just thinking." "Sonny." "About what?" He looked down at her, at those trusting eyes that saw him as a hero no matter what. "About how lucky I am to have you." She grinned and squeezed his hand. They stepped out into the lobby. Harold looked up from his book and waved. "Night, Dylan." "Night, Summer." "Good night, Harold." Summer chirped. The walk to the bus stop was cold and quiet. Dylan kept his awareness sharp, scanning the streets, checking reflections in windows, listening for footsteps. Old habits. But the city felt calm, normal. Whatever danger had existed in that alley had scattered into the night. At home, their apartment was exactly as they had left it. Small, worn, but warm. Dylan made Summer a cup of hot chocolate while she changed into her pajamas. They sat together on the couch, her head against his shoulder, and watched 10 minutes of a cartoon before her eyes grew heavy. "Time for bed, Sonny." She yawned and nodded. As he tucked her in, she looked up at him sleepily. "The person you helped tonight, are they okay?" "Yeah, she's okay." "Good." Summer's eyes drifted closed. "You're really brave, Daddy." Dylan kissed her forehead. "Sleep tight." He closed her door gently and stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to her breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep. Then he walked to the kitchen window, and stared out at the city lights. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Dylan's jaw tightened. He almost didn't answer, but something made him press accept. Hello? Mr. Porter. It was Madeline's voice. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from HR. I know it's late. Dylan closed his eyes. It's fine. Are you all right? I'm home. Safe. Thanks to you. She paused. I've been sitting here for the past hour, trying to make sense of what happened. Those men, they were terrified of you. Or more specifically, of that mark on your arm. Miss Brooks, with respect, you should probably forget what you saw. I can't. Her voice was firm. And I won't. I've spent my entire career reading people, analyzing patterns, predicting behavior. You're not just some maintenance worker, Dylan. Whatever you were before, whatever that tattoo represents, those men knew it meant something serious. Dylan leaned against the counter. He should hang up. Keep the wall intact. But something in her voice, the same exhaustion and loneliness he heard in his own, made him stay on the line. I used to be someone else, he admitted quietly. Someone I'm not proud of. That life ended a long time ago. I'm just trying to raise my daughter and keep my head down. And yet you stepped into an alley against 5 men without hesitation. That's not someone keeping their head down. That was instinct. Training. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. Madeline's tone softened. It means you still care enough to help someone even when it puts you at risk. That's not the mark of a bad person, Dylan. That's the mark of someone who's been through something terrible and came out the other side still willing to do the right thing. Dylan didn't respond. He didn't trust himself to. Madeline continued, I want to hire you. Proper security. Private. I'll triple whatever you're making now. No. Dylan. Listen to me. Those men knew exactly where to find me. They knew about the camera blind spot. This wasn't random. Someone is targeting me, and after tonight, I trust you more than any corporate security firm. I can't, Dylan said. I have summer to think about. Getting involved in your problems, whatever they are, would put her at risk. I won't do that. Then let me help you both. Better apartment, better schools, a future that's more than scraping by. Dylan's grip on the phone tightened. The offer was tempting. God, it was tempting. But he knew better. Money came with strings. Obligations, exposure. I appreciate it, he said finally. But the answer is still no. Good night, Miss Brooks. He hung up before she could respond. Dylan stood in the dark kitchen for a long time after that, staring at nothing. He had worked so hard to build this quiet life, this safe life, and in less than 10 minutes in an alley, he had cracked it open. The worst part was, some buried part of him had felt alive again during that fight. The clarity, the purpose, the knowledge that his hands still remembered how to protect, how to stop threats, how to be useful in a way that mopping floors never would. But that wasn't who he was anymore. It couldn't be. Dylan walked to the small desk in the corner where he kept their important papers. Beneath a stack of bills was a photograph, worn and creased from handling. Elena smiled from the picture, her arm around a younger Dylan, both of them laughing at something long forgotten. I'm trying, he whispered to the photo. I'm really trying. But even as he said it, Dylan knew something had shifted. Madeline Brooks had seen him. Really seen him. Not the invisible janitor, but the man underneath. And once someone looked past the mask, it was almost impossible to put it back on. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Thank you for saving my life tonight. Whatever your past was, it made you into someone worth knowing. If you change your mind, my door is open. MB. Dylan deleted the message. Then he deleted the number. But the word stayed with him as he tried to sleep on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed outside. Worth knowing. When was the last time anyone had said that to him? When was the last time he had felt like anything other than a ghost? He didn't have answers, but as exhaustion finally pulled him under, Dylan's last thought was of Madeline's face in that alley, the fear in her eyes, and the trust that replaced it when she looked at him. Maybe, just maybe, being seen wasn't the worst thing in the world. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with rain tapping against the windows in steady rhythm. Dylan woke on the couch at 5:30, his back stiff, and his mind already running through the day's tasks. Get Summer fed, make her lunch, drop her at school, get to work. The routine was comfortable, safe, predictable. But as he moved through the motions, brewing instant coffee and toasting bread, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air felt different. Charged. Summer emerged from her room rubbing her eyes, her braids messy from sleep. Morning, Daddy. Morning, Sonny. Waffles or cereal? Waffles. She climbed onto the kitchen stool and swung her legs. Did you have weird dreams last night? Dylan glanced at her. Why do you ask? Because you were talking in your sleep. You said someone's name. Elena. Dylan's hands stilled over the waffle iron. He rarely spoke about Elena with Summer, not because he wanted to erase her mother's memory, but because the grief was still too raw, too complicated. Summer had been only 4 when Elena died. Her memories were fragments, more feeling than fact. I was probably just remembering, Dylan said softly. Your mom was on my mind. Summer nodded solemnly. Then, with the abrupt subject changes that only small humans could manage, she asked, Can we get a puppy? Dylan smiled despite himself. Nice try. Eat your breakfast. By 7:15, they were out the door. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. Dylan walked Summer to Oakmont Elementary, 3 blocks from their apartment. The school was old but well-maintained, with cheerful murals painted on the brick exterior and a playground that Summer loved. At the gate, she hugged him tight. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Sonny. Have a good day. He watched her run inside, her backpack bouncing, before turning toward the bus stop. His shift at Apex Financial started at 8, and he was never late. The bus ride downtown was crowded and anonymous, exactly how Dylan preferred it. He stared out the rain-streaked window and let the city blur past. But when the tower came into view, something in his chest tightened. What if Madeline said something to HR? What if she pushed the issue? What if last night became something he couldn't control? He entered through the service entrance, clocked in, and headed straight for the supply closet on the 3rd floor. Work, focus. That was the answer. Keep moving, keep invisible. But at 9:30, while Dylan was buffing the lobby floors, Harold approached with an uncertain expression. Hey, Dylan. Miss Brooks called down. She wants to see you in her office. Dylan's stomach dropped. Did she say why? Nope. Just said it was important. Dylan nodded slowly. He finished the section he was working on, returned the buffer to storage, and took the elevator to the 40th floor. Each second of the ascent felt heavier than the last. When he knocked on Madeline's door, her voice called out immediately. Come in. She sat behind her desk, looking every bit the CEO in a navy suit and pearl earrings. But her expression was warmer than he expected. Not corporate. Personal. Dylan, thank you for coming. She gestured to the chair across from her. Please, sit. He remained standing. With respect, Miss Brooks, I'm on the clock. If this is about last night, I'd rather not discuss it here. It's about last night, she confirmed. But not in the way you think. She stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. This morning, I received a message, an email from an encrypted account. No name, no signature, just a warning. Dylan's posture shifted subtly, his weight redistributing. What kind of warning? Madeline pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. The message was brief. Stay away from projects that don't concern you. Your algorithm is disruptive. Disruption brings consequences. This is your only notice. Dylan scanned the words twice. When did this come in? 4 a.m. Whoever sent it knows my personal email, which is not public information. They also referenced my latest project, A new AI trading protocol that we haven't announced yet. Her voice was steady, but Dylan could hear the tension underneath. Someone inside my company is feeding information out. And last night's attack wasn't random. It was a message. Dylan exhaled slowly. This was bigger than muggers in an alley. This was orchestrated. Professional. Have you contacted the police? Yes. They're treating it as harassment, but they don't have resources for cyber threats unless there's immediate danger. She looked at him directly. I know you said no last night, but I'm asking again. Not as your employer, as someone who's scared and doesn't know who to trust. Dylan wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But Madeline's eyes held the same look he'd seen in Elena's once, years ago, when she had asked him to leave the collective. It was the look of someone who believed he could be better than his worst choices. If I help, Dylan said carefully. It's not as security. I'm not going back to that life, but I can advise, I can watch. Just until you figure out who's behind this. Madeline's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's all I'm asking. And Summer comes first. Always. If things escalate, I'm out. Understood. Dylan nodded. Show me everything. The email. The project. Anyone who has access to your systems. For the next hour, Madeline walked him through her current work. The new algorithm was designed to detect market manipulation in real time, flagging suspicious trades, and protecting small investors from predatory practices. It was revolutionary, and it threatened powerful people who profited from those manipulations. Who else knows about this? Dylan asked. My core development team. 5 people. My CFO, and the board, but only in general terms. Start with the team. Someone close has to be the leak. Madeline pulled up personnel files on her screen. 5 faces stared back. 3 men, 2 women. All brilliant. All vetted. All trusted. Dylan studied each photo. Do any of them have financial trouble? Debts? Gambling problems? Not that I know of. But I'll dig deeper. Do it quietly. If the league finds out you're investigating, they'll either destroy evidence or escalate. Dylan stood. I need to get back to work before people notice I'm gone. We'll talk tonight after my shift. Madeline stood too. Dylan, thank you. Really? He nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. That tattoo you saw last night. Don't research it. Don't ask around about it. Some things are better left buried. Her eyes searched his face. Will it come back to haunt you? It already has. Dylan left her office and returned to his routine, but the weight on his shoulders had doubled. He had told himself he was done with this world, done with threats and shadows, and the kind of problems that required his old skills. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. That evening, after his shift ended, and Summer was safely home doing homework, Dylan sat on the fire escape outside their apartment. The city stretched before him, a million lights hiding a million secrets. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long time before finally making a call he had sworn never to make again. The voice that answered was rough, familiar. I was wondering when you'd reach out. Kane, Dylan said. I need information. Of course you do. Nobody calls me for friendly catch-up. There was a pause. I heard whispers. Someone saw the ink. Word travels fast, brother. I need to know if the collective is active again. And if they're targeting a tech CEO named Madeline Brooks. Kane was silent for a beat too long. You're playing with fire, Dylan. You walked away. They let you walk because of Elena, but that grace expired when she did. Answer the question. The collective fragmented after the crackdown, but pieces of it still operate. Different name. Same methods. They hire out now, mercenary work. If someone's targeting your CEO, it's not personal, it's business. Dylan's jaw clenched. Who would hire them? Anyone with money and a problem. Could be corporate rivals, could be investors, could be someone inside her own company. Kane's voice dropped. My advice: stay out of it. You've got a daughter to think about. I am thinking about her. This doesn't go away just because I ignore it. Then you already know what you have to do. Kane sighed. Be careful, brother. The people we used to run with, they don't forget faces. And they sure as hell don't forgive betrayal. The call ended. Dylan sat in the cold for a while, longer, watching his breath mist in the air. He thought about Summer sleeping inside, about the fragile peace they had built, about how easily it could all shatter. But he also thought about Madeline, alone in that tower, surrounded by people she couldn't trust, facing threats she couldn't see. And he realized that walking away wasn't an option anymore, not because he wanted back into that life, but because sometimes the right thing and the hard thing were the same thing. Dylan stood, climbed back through the window, and made a decision. He would protect Madeline Brooks. He would find the leak. And he would do it without becoming the person he used to be. Or he would die trying. 3 days passed in tense routine. Dylan worked his shifts, cleaned his floors, and stayed invisible. But every evening, after Summer was asleep, he met with Madeline in her office. Together, they combed through files, analyzed communication patterns, and built a profile of the potential moles inside Apex Financial. On the fourth night, they found it. Madeline sat back in her chair, her face pale. I can't believe it. On the screen was a series of encrypted messages traced through a back door in the company server. The sender was someone with deep access, someone who had been with Apex since the beginning. Ethan Vaughn, her CFO, her right hand, her friend. Are you sure? Madeline's voice was barely a whisper. Dylan pointed to the timestamps. These messages went out every time you had a private meeting about the algorithm. And look at this. He clicked to another file. He's been moving money. Small amounts, laundered through shell accounts. It started 6 months ago. Madeline closed her eyes. Ethan has been with me for 8 years. He was at my wedding. He helped me through the divorce. Why would he do this? Dylan pulled up another document, a financial record showing Ethan's personal accounts. He's drowning in debt, bad investments, a divorce of his own. He's lost everything, and he's desperate. So he sold me out. Looks that way. Madeline stood abruptly and walked to the window. The city glittered below, indifferent to her betrayal. What do I do? If I confront him, he'll destroy evidence. If I fire him, he might go public with proprietary information. Dylan leaned back in his chair, thinking. You need leverage. Something that makes him more afraid of exposure than he is of his creditors. Like what? Let me handle it. Madeline turned sharply. I'm not asking you to hurt him, Dylan. I'm not going to. But I am going to have a conversation he won't forget. The next evening, Dylan waited outside a high-rise apartment building in the Pearl District. Ethan Vaughn lived on the 12th floor, alone, in a place far too expensive for his current financial situation. Dylan had watched him for 2 days, learning his patterns. Ethan left work at 7, stopped for takeout, and arrived home by 8. Predictable, vulnerable. At 8:15, Dylan knocked on the door. Ethan opened it, holding a container of pad thai. His tie loosened, his expression confused. Can I help you? Mr. Vaughn, my name is Dylan Porter. I work at Apex. We need to talk. Ethan's confusion deepened. About what? Dylan stepped forward, not threatening, but deliberate. About the messages you've been sending, the information you've been selling, and why you tried to have Madeline Brooks hurt. The color drained from Ethan's face. He tried to close the door, but Dylan's hand shot out, stopping it effortlessly. I'm not here to hurt you, Dylan said calmly. But I am here to make sure you understand the consequences of your choices. Ethan stumbled backward into his apartment. Dylan followed, closing the door behind him. The space was a mess, boxes stacked against walls, furniture askew, the chaos of a life unraveling. I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan stammered. Dylan pulled out his phone and showed him the evidence, the encrypted messages, the financial transfers, the timeline. We have everything. The only question is what happens next. Ethan sank onto his couch. his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I just needed money. They said it was just information. Corporate espionage. Nothing violent. But it became violent. I didn't know they'd send people after her. I swear. When I heard about the alley, I tried to back out, but they threatened me. Said if I didn't finish the job, they'd come after me instead. Dylan sat across from him, his voice steady. Who hired you? Ethan looked up, his eyes red. A broker. I never got a real name. Just a contact who paid in cryptocurrency. They wanted details on the algorithm. Access codes. Her schedule. They said they were investors trying to protect their portfolios. Investors don't hire muggers. I know that now. Ethan's voice cracked. I've destroyed everything. My career. My reputation. Madeline trusted me. And I sold her out for money I've already lost. Dylan studied him. Ethan wasn't evil. He was weak, desperate, the kind of person who made terrible choices when backed into a corner. Here's what's going to happen, Dylan said. You're going to write a full confession. Every detail, every transaction, every contact. You're going to turn it over to Madeline and resign quietly. No severance. No recommendations. You disappear. And if I don't? Dylan leaned forward. Then I make a phone call. And the people you've been working with, they find out you've been talking to us. How long do you think you'd last? Ethan's face went white. You're one of them. I heard rumors about someone in the building. Someone with a past. I'm not one of them anymore, Dylan said quietly. But I remember how they operate. And trust me, you don't want them to think you're a liability. Ethan nodded, defeated. I'll do it. I'll confess. Just please, keep me safe. That depends on you. Dylan stood and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. You had a choice, Ethan. You chose wrong. But you still have a chance to do one thing right. Don't waste it. He left Ethan sitting in the ruins of his life and took the elevator down. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean. Dylan felt no satisfaction, no victory. Just the heavy weight of knowing that betrayal often came from the people closest to you. Back at Apex, Madeline was waiting in her office. Dylan handed her the flash drive containing Ethan's confession, recorded and signed. She read it in silence, her expression hardening with each line. When she finished, she looked up. He put everyone at risk. The company. The employees. Me. He did. And now he just walks away? He loses everything that mattered to him, Dylan said. His career. His reputation. His freedom. If you decide to press charges. But if you want him gone quietly, this is the way. Madeline set the drive down and rubbed her temples. I hate that you're right. I know. She looked at him for a long moment. You could have heard him. I saw it in your eyes when you left tonight, but you didn't. No. Why? Dylan thought about Elena, about Summer, about the promise he made to be better than his past. Because violence is easy. Restraint is hard. And I've spent too long trying to be the kind of man my daughter can be proud of. Madeline stood and crossed to him. For the first time since they met, she reached out and took his hand. Not professionally. Personally. Thank you, Dylan. For everything. He squeezed her hand gently, then let go. Get some rest, Miss Brooks. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As Dylan left the building and headed home, he felt the pieces of his carefully constructed life shifting. He had tried to stay hidden, tried to stay safe, but the truth was, some people were meant to stand in the gap, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a calling he had been running from for too long. When he arrived home, Summer was asleep, her homework neatly stacked on the table. Dylan sat beside her bed and watched her breathe, so peaceful, so trusting. I'm trying to be good, he whispered. I hope that's enough. And in the quiet of that small apartment, with the city humming outside, Dylan Porter made a decision. He wouldn't go back to who he used to be. But he wouldn't hide from who he was capable of being either. He would find the balance. For Summer, for Madeline, and for himself. Ethan Vaughn resigned the following Monday. The official press release cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. No scandal, no investigation, just a quiet exit that left the employees whispering but uninformed. Madeline stood at her office window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The betrayal still stung, a dull ache that wouldn't fade. She had trusted Ethan completely, had celebrated his successes and supported him through his failures, and he had repaid her by selling her out to people who wanted to harm her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Dylan entered carrying a box. Security swept his office, found these hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. He set the box on her conference table. Inside were USB drives, burner phones, and handwritten notes detailing meeting schedules and security protocols. Madeline picked up one of the phones. He was thorough. Desperate people usually are. She set the phone down and looked at Dylan. Really, looked at him. In the week since the alley incident, she had seen him almost every evening. What had started as a crisis had evolved into something else. He made her coffee the way she liked it without asking. She had learned that he took his daughter to the library every Saturday. They had shared late dinners of takeout Chinese while combing through files, and somewhere in those quiet hours, the distance between CEO and janitor had dissolved. "Can I ask you something personal?" Madeline said. Dylan nodded, leaning against the table. "Summer's mother. What happened to her?" Dylan was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Her name was Elena. She was a social worker. Spent her days fighting for families that the system had given up on. She saw something in me worth saving when I couldn't see it myself." "How did she pass?" "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. Summer was 4. His jaw tightened. I wasn't there. I was working a late shift, and Elena was driving home from her sister's place. By the time I got to the hospital, she was gone." Madeline's chest constricted. "Dylan, I'm so sorry. She made me promise something before Summer was born. Made me swear that if anything happened to her, I would give our daughter a normal life. Safety. Stability. No more of the dangerous work I used to do." He looked at Madeline. "I've spent 3 years trying to keep that promise. And you have. Summer is happy. Healthy. She adores you. But I wonder sometimes if hiding is the same as protecting. If teaching her that the world is safe is doing her a disservice." Dylan rubbed his face. "Elena would know what to do. She always did." Madeline stepped closer. "I think Elena would see what I see. A father who shows up every day, who sacrifices his own comfort for his daughter's security, who steps into danger without hesitation when someone needs help." She paused. "That's not hiding, Dylan. That's love." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Not just gratitude, not just respect, something deeper. Dylan cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should get back to work. People are starting to notice I spend a lot of time on the 40th floor." "Let them notice," Madeline said softly. "I don't care what they think." But Dylan did. He cared because visibility meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk. Not just to him, but to Summer. That evening, after his shift, Dylan picked Summer up from the after-school program. She bounced out of the building with a painting in her hands, her face lit with pride. "Look what I made. It's us at the beach. See? That's you, and that's me, and those are the waves." Dylan examined the painting. Bright blue water, yellow sand, 2 stick figures holding hands. "It's beautiful. Sunny. Can we go to the beach? For real sometime. Maybe this summer." As they walked home, Summer chattered about her day. Her best friend had shared cookies at lunch. They were learning about butterflies in science. Her teacher said she was getting better at reading. Dylan listened, smiling, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Madeline, about the way she had looked at him when he talked about Elena, about how easy it had become to be around her, and that terrified him. Later that night, after Summer was asleep, Dylan's phone rang. "Madeline. I hope I'm not calling too late," she said. "You're not. Everything okay? I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. "That probably sounds ridiculous." "It doesn't. I've been thinking about what you said, about hiding versus protecting. I do the same thing, Dylan. I built walls so high that nobody could get close enough to hurt me. After my divorce, after the lawsuits and the board fights, I convinced myself that being alone was safer." Dylan sat on the couch in the dark. "And now I'm not sure safety is worth the cost. These past few weeks, working with you, talking to you, I feel like I can breathe again, like I'm not carrying everything alone." Dylan's throat tightened. "Madeline, I can't be what you need. My life is complicated. I have a daughter who depends on me. And my past, it's not something that just goes away." "I'm not asking for perfect," she said quietly. "I'm just asking for honest, for real. Can you give me that?" He wanted to say no, wanted to protect them both from the inevitable complications. But the truth was, he was tired of being alone too. Tired of pretending that he didn't feel something when she smiled, that he didn't look forward to their late-night conversations, that he hadn't started to imagine what it might be like to let someone in. "Yeah," he said finally, "I can give you that." Madeline exhaled, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Good. Because I think we could be good for each other, Dylan Porter, if we're brave enough to try." After they said goodnight, Dylan sat in the darkness for a long time. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the soft hum of the refrigerator. He thought about Elena, about the life they had planned together that had been stolen too soon, and he thought about the guilt he carried, the feeling that moving forward meant leaving her behind. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe honoring Elena's memory meant living fully, not just surviving. Maybe it meant showing Summer that love didn't end with loss, that hearts could heal and grow and make room for new people. Dylan pulled out his phone and looked at an old photo of Elena. She was laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from every pixel. "I hope I'm doing this right," he whispered. And in the silence that followed, he felt something that might have been permission, or maybe just peace. The next 2 weeks passed in cautious optimism. Ethan's confession had been turned over to federal investigators, who were now tracking the cryptocurrency payments to their source. Apex Financial Security was overhauled, new protocols implemented, and the algorithm project was temporarily paused while everything was reviewed. Madeline seemed lighter. She smiled more, stayed at the office less. And twice, she had invited Dylan and Summer to dinner at a quiet bistro near the waterfront, where they sat in a corner booth and talked about everything except danger and betrayal. Summer adored Madeline. She asked her questions about computers and business, and Madeline answered with patience and genuine interest. Watching them together did something to Dylan's heart that he couldn't quite name, but on a gray Thursday afternoon, the fragile peace shattered. Dylan was restocking supplies in the third-floor storage room when his phone buzzed. "Kane, we need to talk. Now." Dylan stepped into the stairwell for privacy. "What's wrong?" "Your CEO's problem just got bigger. The broker Ethan was working with, he's connected to someone you know. Someone from the old days." Dylan's blood went cold. "Who?" "Vincent Shaw." The name hit like a physical blow. Vincent Shaw had been one of the founding members of the Viper Strike Collective, brutal, calculating, and utterly without mercy. When the collective fractured, Vincent had taken his skills private, building a network of operatives who handled problems for the highest bidder. "Shaw's in prison," Dylan said. "Has been for 6 years. Was in prison. He got out 3 months ago. Good behavior. And according to my sources, he's been rebuilding." Madeline's algorithm threatens some very wealthy clients of his. Clients who pay extremely well to make problems disappear. Dylan's mind raced. Does he know I'm involved? Not yet. But he will. Word spreads, brother. And when Vincent finds out that Dylan Porter, the man who testified against the collective, is protecting the target he was paid to eliminate, things are going to get bloody. I need to move Madeline. Get her somewhere safe. You need to run, take your daughter and disappear. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Kane sighed. You always were too stubborn for your own good. Fine, but watch your back. Vincent doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. The call ended. Dylan stood in the stairwell, his heart pounding. Everything he had built, the quiet life, the safety, it was about to come crashing down. And this time, Summer was in the blast radius. He pulled out his phone and called Madeline. We need to talk. My place, tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Her voice was immediately tense. What happened? I'll explain when you get here. Just trust me. That evening, Madeline arrived at Dylan's apartment building. It was her first time seeing where he lived, and he felt a flash of embarrassment at the worn carpet and the peeling paint in the hallway. But Madeline didn't seem to notice. Her focus was entirely on him. Inside the apartment, Summer sat at the kitchen table working on a puzzle. She looked up and grinned. Madeline, are you staying for dinner? Maybe, sweetheart. Your dad and I need to talk first. Dylan led Madeline to the small balcony that overlooked the parking lot. The evening air was cool, and the city hummed in the distance. Tell me, Madeline said. Dylan explained everything. Vincent Shaw, the collective. The fact that this wasn't just corporate espionage anymore. It was personal. It was revenge. Madeline listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You testified against them. That's why you left. I saw things that crossed a line. Innocent people getting hurt. I couldn't be part of it anymore, so I cooperated with the feds. Gave them names, locations, everything. Most of the leadership went to prison. But Vincent, he was careful. They only got him on minor charges. And now he's out. And he blames you. He blames me for the fall of everything he built. If he finds out I'm involved with you, he'll come after both of us. Not for money, for principle. Madeline turned to face him. Then we go to the police, FBI. We tell them everything. It won't matter. Vincent operates in shadows. By the time law enforcement mobilizes, he'll have already moved. And he won't just come for you. He'll come for Summer. Madeline's face went pale. Then what do we do? Dylan leaned against the railing, his mind working through scenarios. We finish this. We draw him out on our terms. Control the situation. You mean use me as bait? I mean we stop running and start fighting smart. Madeline shook her head. I can't ask you to do this. You have Summer to think about. If something happens to you because of me, I'd never forgive myself. Dylan turned to her. And if something happens to you because I walked away, I'd never forgive myself either. Their eyes locked. In that moment, all the careful distance they had maintained collapsed. Madeline stepped closer, her hand finding his. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But I trust you. Dylan squeezed her hand. Then let's do this right. Together. Inside, Summer had finished her puzzle and was watching them through the glass door. She waved. Dylan waved back, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his past had finally caught up with him. But this time, he wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The plan took shape over the next 48 hours. Dylan reached out to Kane, who reluctantly agreed to help. They would leak information through the underground network that Madeline was moving the algorithm to an off-site location for testing. A warehouse in northwest Portland, isolated and easy to control. Vincent would come. Men like him couldn't resist the opportunity to finish a job and settle an old score simultaneously, but Madeline insisted on one condition. No deaths. I don't care what he's done. I won't have blood on my hands. Dylan had expected this. It was one of the things he respected about her. Even facing a threat this serious, she held on to her principles. Agreed, he said. We contain him, capture him, turn him over to federal agents. Clean. Kane had laughed when Dylan told him, "You've gone soft, brother." Maybe he had, but soft didn't mean weak. It meant controlled, purposeful. The night before the confrontation, Dylan couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch staring at the ceiling while Summer slept peacefully in the next room. His mind kept circling back to the same question. What if something went wrong? What if Vincent got past him? What if Summer ended up alone? At 2 in the morning, his phone buzzed. Madeline. You awake? Yeah. Me too. Can I come over? 20 minutes later, she was sitting beside him on the couch. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down, looking more human than he'd ever seen her. I've been thinking, she said, about why I built Apex, about why I work so hard. Why? Because after my divorce, I felt powerless. My ex-husband controlled everything. The money, the narrative, the lawyers. I built this company to prove I didn't need anyone, to prove I could stand alone. She looked at Dylan. But I've been miserable, successful, respected, and completely miserable. Dylan reached for her hand. You don't have to be alone, Madeline. I know. You've shown me that. You and Summer. These past few weeks, having dinner together, laughing, just being normal, I remembered what it feels like to want something more than success. What do you want? She smiled softly. Connection, purpose, family, the things that actually matter. Dylan pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tomorrow, Madeline said quietly, when this is over, regardless of how it goes, I want to try, really try, not just surviving or protecting ourselves, but actually living. I want that too. Promise me something. If things go wrong tomorrow, you take Summer and you run. Don't try to be a hero. Just keep her safe. Dylan's jaw tightened. Nothing's going to go wrong. Promise me anyway. He looked at her, at the fear and hope mingled in her eyes. I promise. The next evening, as the sun set over Portland, Dylan stood in the empty warehouse. Kane was positioned on the second-floor catwalk, with a clear line of sight. 2 federal agents, off the books, were hidden near the exits. Madeline was in a secure location 3 miles away, monitored and protected. At 7:15, Vincent Shaw arrived. He came alone, as expected. Men like Vincent didn't need backup for jobs they considered personal. He was older than Dylan remembered, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, but the cold intelligence remained. Dylan Porter, Vincent said, his voice echoing in the empty space. I heard you'd crawled out of whatever hole you'd been hiding in. Vincent, you cost me 8 years. 8 years in a cage because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. You hurt innocent people. I couldn't let that continue. Vincent smiled. Always so righteous. That's what I remember most about you, the moral superiority. He looked around. So where is she? The CEO? I assume this is a trap. She's safe. And you're done. Vincent laughed. You think you can take me? You were good, Dylan. But I trained you. I know every move you'll make before you make it. I'm not here to fight you. Then why are you here? Dylan stepped forward, his hands open. To give you a choice. Walk away. Disappear. Or go back to prison. Those are your options. Vincent's expression darkened. You're offering me mercy? After everything? I'm offering you a chance to stop. To choose something different. For a moment, Vincent seemed to consider it. Then his hand moved toward his jacket. But before he could draw whatever weapon he carried, red laser dots appeared on his chest. Kane's voice came over a speaker. Don't. Federal agents emerged from the shadows. Vincent froze, rage and resignation warring on his face. As they cuffed him, Vincent looked at Dylan. "You could have been something. We could have built an empire." "I already have everything I need," Dylan said quietly. And as Vincent was led away, Dylan felt something release in his chest. Not victory, not satisfaction, just relief. The past was finally, truly over. Later that night, at Madeline's apartment, they sat together on her balcony overlooking the city. Summer was asleep on the couch inside, exhausted from the stress of the day. "It's really over?" Madeline asked. "It's over." She leaned against him. "What happens now?" Dylan smiled. "Now we figure out what comes next. Together." And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. 6 months had passed since Vincent Shaw was taken into federal custody. The trial had been swift, and this time, the charges stuck. Racketeering, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping. He would spend the next 20 years behind bars, and the remnants of the Viper Strike Collective had scattered like shadows in sunlight. Spring had arrived in Portland with an explosion of cherry blossoms and warmth that felt like the city itself was exhaling after a long, hard winter. Dylan stood on the corner of Morrison Street, watching workers hang a banner across the front of a newly renovated building. The letters were bold and clear. The Second Chance Center. Education, protection, and hope. Madeline appeared beside him, 2 coffee cups in her hands. She wore jeans and a light blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger somehow, lighter, as if the weight of carrying everything alone had finally lifted. "They did a beautiful job," she said, handing him a cup. Dylan took it, his eyes still on the banner. "Your idea. Your money. I just helped with the planning." "Our idea," Madeline corrected. "You're the one who knew what people actually need. I just wrote the checks." The Second Chance Center had been Madeline's vision after everything settled. She had realized that her algorithm, the technology that had nearly cost her life, could be used for something more meaningful than just market predictions. She had restructured Apex Financial, bringing in new leadership and pivoting the company's focus toward financial literacy programs for underserved communities. But the center was something different, something personal. It offered free self-defense classes, job training, counseling for families affected by violence, and after-school programs for young people who needed safe spaces. Dylan ran the self-defense program 3 evenings a week, teaching techniques that emphasized protection over aggression, awareness over fear. The door to the center opened, and Summer bounded out wearing a volunteer t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big. At 8 years old, now, she had grown taller, her face losing some of its roundness but none of its brightness. "Daddy, Madeline, come see." We set up all the chairs in the main room, and Miss Kiana said we can put up the welcome posters now. Dylan ruffled her hair. "Lead the way, Sonny." Inside, the space was transformed. What had once been an abandoned commercial building was now filled with light. The main room had polished wooden floors, large windows, and walls painted in warm colors. Motivational quotes were stenciled near the ceiling. In one corner sat a small library. In another, computer stations. Along the back wall hung photos of the community members who had already benefited from the programs, their faces smiling, their eyes full of renewed hope. Kiana Ford, the center's director, and a former social worker who had known Elena years ago, walked over with a clipboard. She was in her mid-50s, with kind eyes and an efficient manner that put everyone at ease. "We're on schedule," she said. "Doors open to the public in 2 hours. Press will be here at 6 for the ribbon cutting." "Dylan, you're still planning to say a few words, right?" Dylan shifted uncomfortably. "I'm better behind the scenes." "Too bad," Madeline said with a smile. "This place exists because of your vision. People need to hear from you. They need to hear from someone who's lived it," Kiana added. "Someone who understands that second chances aren't just about opportunity. They're about belief. And you believe in people, Dylan. That's why this works." Before Dylan could protest further, Summer tugged on his sleeve. "Please, Daddy, I want to hear you talk. You never let me hear the speeches." He looked down at his daughter, at the pride shining in her eyes, and felt his resistance crumble. "Fine, but I'm keeping it short." Summer cheered and ran off to help hang more posters. As the afternoon progressed, volunteers arrived. Some were corporate sponsors from Apex Financial. Others were community members, formerly incarcerated individuals, single parents, and young people looking for purpose. They worked together, setting up refreshment tables, arranging chairs, testing the sound system. Dylan moved through the space, helping where needed, but mostly observing. He watched a teenager show an older woman how to use the computer. He saw a father and son team up to hang a banner. He noticed a woman in her 40s, wearing a visitor badge, standing near the self-defense studio with tears in her eyes. He approached her gently. "Can I help you with something?" She turned, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I read about this place in the paper, about the classes you offer. My ex-husband, he used to hurt me, for years, and I never fought back because I didn't know how. I didn't think I could." Dylan's expression softened. "You can, and you will. The first class is tomorrow evening at 7. Free. No judgment, just skills and support. Will you be teaching?" "I will." She nodded, clutching the brochure in her hands like it was a lifeline. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." But he did know. He knew exactly what it meant to feel powerless, to believe the only options were to hide or to become something you hated. And he knew what it meant to discover there was a third way, a better way. As 6 o'clock approached, the crowd grew. Local news cameras set up near the entrance. City council members arrived, along with business leaders and nonprofit directors. But there were also regular people, neighbors, families, the ones this center was actually built for. Madeline stood at the podium that had been set up outside beneath the banner. She wore a charcoal dress, professional but approachable, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the speakers. "Thank you all for coming. 6 months ago, I nearly lost everything. Not my company, not my money, but my life. And in that moment, when I was at my most vulnerable, a man I barely knew chose to step forward. He didn't know me. He didn't know me anything, but he acted anyway because he believed protecting others was more important than protecting himself." She looked at Dylan, who stood at the edge of the crowd with Summer beside him. "Dylan Porter taught me that strength isn't about power or wealth or status. It's about showing up. It's about using whatever skills you have to make someone else's life a little bit safer, a little bit better, and that's what this center represents. It's a place where people can learn to protect themselves, support each other, and build futures they didn't think were possible." The crowd applauded. Madeline gestured for Dylan to join her at the podium. He hesitated, but Summer gave him a gentle push, and he walked forward. Standing before the crowd, Dylan felt exposed in a way he hadn't in years, but when he looked out at the faces, he didn't see judgment. He saw hope. "I'm not great with speeches," Dylan began, his voice steady but quiet. "But I know something about second chances. I've needed a lot of them. I made mistakes, big ones. And for a long time, I thought the best I could do was hide from my past and try not to make things worse." He paused, glancing at Summer, who watched him with absolute faith. "But my daughter taught me something. She taught me that hiding isn't the same as healing. And that the skills I was ashamed of, the parts of my past I wanted to bury, they didn't have to define me. They could be redeemed, used for something good." His eyes found Madeline. "Someone else taught me that it's okay to let people in. That carrying everything alone isn't strength. It's just loneliness. And that building something meaningful requires trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to believe that tomorrow can be different from yesterday." The crowd was silent, listening. "This center isn't about me," Dylan continued. "It's about every person who's ever felt powerless, every parent trying to keep their family safe, every young person looking for direction. Every survivor who's ready to reclaim their life. You deserve skills, you deserve support, and you deserve to know that your past doesn't determine your future. He stepped back from the microphone. The applause started small, then grew, rolling through the crowd like a wave. Summer ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Madeline joined them, and for a moment, the three of them stood together, a family forged not by blood or circumstance, but by choice. After the ribbon was cut and the doors officially opened, people flooded inside. They explored the facilities, signed up for classes, and talked with volunteers. Dylan watched a young man, no older than 20, stare at the photos on the wall with an expression of wonder. "You think someone like me could really do this?" the young man asked. "The job training program." Kiana appeared beside him. "I know you can. That's why we're here." As evening settled over the city, the crowd began to thin. Dylan found Madeline on the second-floor balcony that overlooked the main room. She leaned against the railing, watching the last few visitors below. "Penny for your thoughts," Dylan said. She smiled. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now. 6 months ago, I was terrified, alone, convinced that success meant doing everything myself. And now, look at this." She gestured to the space below. "None of this would exist if you hadn't been in that building. If you hadn't cared enough to step into that alley. You would have found another way. You're resourceful. Maybe, but I wouldn't have found you." Dylan moved beside her, their shoulders touching. "I'm glad you did. Both of you, you and Summer. You've given me something I didn't think I'd have again. A reason to stop running. A reason to believe I could be more than my mistakes." Madeline turned to face him fully. "Dylan Porter, you've never been just your mistakes. You've always been the man who stands up when someone needs help. The father who puts his daughter first. The person who sees the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves." She reached up and touched his face gently. "I love you. I know it's only been 6 months. I know it's complicated. But I love you, and I needed you to know." Dylan's breath caught. He had been so careful not to rush, not to assume, not to risk the fragile thing they were building. But standing there, with the center humming with purpose below them, and Summer's laughter echoing from somewhere inside, he realized that fear had no place here anymore. "I love you too," he said. "I have for a while. I was just scared to say it." Madeline smiled, and Dylan kissed her. Soft, sure, a promise of something lasting. When they pulled apart, Summer was standing in the doorway, grinning. "Finally. I've been waiting forever. For you guys to figure that out." They laughed, and Summer ran to them, and they held her between them, the three of them looking out at the center, at the community gathering below, at the future they were building together. Later that night, after they had locked up and said goodbye to the last volunteers, Dylan walked with Madeline and Summer through the quiet streets. The city lights twinkled above them, and the spring air smelled like flowers and fresh beginnings. "What do you think happens next?" Summer asked, skipping ahead. Dylan looked at Madeline, who squeezed his hand. "Whatever we want," Madeline said. "That's the beautiful part. We get to choose." And as they walked home together, Dylan realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by his past. He wasn't hiding from his skills or ashamed of his scars. He was simply present. A father, a partner, a man who had found a way to turn his darkest chapters into light for others. The Second Chance Center would help hundreds of people in the years to come. Dylan's classes would teach countless individuals how to stand strong, how to protect themselves, how to move through the world with confidence instead of fear. Madeline's programs would lift families out of poverty and give young people tools to build futures. But more than any of that, they had found each other. 3 people from different worlds, brought together by danger, bound together by trust, and transformed by the simple act of choosing love over fear. And that, Dylan thought as Summer's hand slipped into his, was the greatest second chance of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.